constitutional changes in Vanuatu, New Zealand and U.S. engagements with the Pacific Islands, Li Qiang's visit to Canberra and Wellington, and more. Today is Friday, June 28th, and welcome back to Pacific Airwaves, a podcast on the Pacific Islands from the Southeast Asia Program and the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative at CSIS. I'm Andreyka, in the studio with Monica Sato from AMTI.
Hey Andreyka, how have you been? I hear you got a cat.
I do have a cat now, so in time for Father's Day, I have become a cat dad, and it's been an incredible process so far.
I also own 2 cats. I adopted 2 cats, so I am very happy about this development. What were the first days like owning a new kitten?
It felt like, close to what I imagine being a new, a father, like a parent would be, just waking up in the middle of the night, having to play with it. But it's been really, really great. We should honestly bring them in for an episode someday. Our pets,
our collective
pets.
cats.
They can meow in the background as we talk through developments in the Pacific.
Pacific Airwaves. Okay, anyway, I think we should continue.
Let's dive into it. Let's talk about the news that is making waves in the Pacific.
To kick things off, Vanuatu on May 29th held a referendum for 2 constitutional amendments in hopes of stabilizing domestic politics.
The First Amendment states that if a member of parliament leaves or is forced to resign from their political party, their seat would be declared vacated. The second clause will force independent members of parliament to join political parties.
Both were approved, as the results of the national referendum show that approximately 60% of Vanuatu voters were in favor of each change. Why did Vanuatu's voters support these constitutional amendments?
Prior to the referendum, independents and members of the opposition could cast no-confidence votes to replace the incumbent political party, resulting in incoherence and disunity in the parliament.
Oh, I get it. Particularly as Vanuatu experienced 3 prime ministers in a month, these amendments aim to limit upheavals in government.
See, that's the intention, but there are concerns about whether such reforms will be effective, as similar laws in Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands didn't deliver positive results.
Well, let's hope for the best.
Turning our attention to regional developments, the United States just eased restrictions on its Pacific territories joining the Pacific Islands Forum.
On June 6th, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken formally announced that Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands were approved to join the forum as non-voting members.
It's a big change in U.S. policy. Previously, U.S. territories were prohibited from participating in any international organizations.
Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa have been advocating their membership bid after holding observer status since 2011, demonstrating their desire for greater autonomy over external affairs.
But some restrictions are still in place. Although the U.S. government supports its territories when it comes to PIF membership, Blinken warned them not to independently exercise any foreign policy that overrides the U.S. federal government.
Next up on U.S. activity in the region, the U.S. Missile Defense Agency, or MDA, is seeking public consultation on a proposal to test missile defenses in Guam. The proposal aims to launch 2 test flights per year within the next decade.
The United States is planning to build a defense system that tracks and destroys target missiles. The MDA highlighted rapidly evolving Chinese missile threats as a driver of the $892 million investment package.
But Guam's acting governor expressed his concern over the tight deadline of 30 days for the submission of public consultations on missile testing plans, due to potential negative impacts on tourism and private landowners.
And 30 days is a very tight deadline. I read that the proposed missile testing may require the relocation of residents in northern Guam.
Yes, and that's why the governor requested a 60-day extension to properly discuss the issue with the wider community. But the United States hasn't gotten back to Guam's request yet.
And we should watch out for the U.S. response on this matter and keep our listeners updated on any developments.
We absolutely will. Moving along, the United States is not the only country engaging with the Pacific Island nations. New Zealand's Prime Minister Christopher Luxon commenced his first trip to the Pacific since entering office, visiting Niue and Fiji in early June.
Sounds like a promising trip. Could you tell me a little more about the visit's goals?
Sure. The visit was focused on emphasizing regional cooperation with the Pacific, as well as announcing plans to stimulate business investment and bilateral trade with the respective islands.
Did any of those plans make any headway in Niue, Luxon's first stop in the Pacific?
Actually, notable progress was made. In Niue, Prime Minister Luxon announced his plan to invest $20.5 million in a renewable energy project. Set to begin in the first quarter of 2025, the project aims to reduce the island's dependence on diesel and bring Niue's renewable energy generation to 80%.
That's quite an ambitious project. I also heard that the trip celebrated 50 years of Niue's free association with New Zealand.
That's right. The trip reaffirmed the country's bilateral relations and notably initiated Niue's climate mitigation efforts, a crucial project given the island's vulnerability to climate change.
Luxon's next stop was Fiji, where he announced around $27 million for various projects, including climate relocation funding for residents and programs to help farmers adapt to rising temperatures. Luxon also removed visa requirements for Fijians visiting New Zealand.
However, New Zealand's funding for the Pacific region was slashed by approximately $16 million, drawing criticism from community leaders for cutting key programs and reducing climate aid.
It's a real blow to the Pacific. Reduced funding risks impacting the public health sector and climate aid provision. While the cuts are part of New Zealand's initiative of reducing government spending, the Pacific is feeling its direct impacts, which may deepen as time passes.
Meanwhile, New Zealand and Australia both hosted visits by Chinese Premier Li Qiang, the first visit by a Chinese premier in 7 years.
For Australia, this comes after Foreign Ministers Wang Yi and Penny Wong met in March, a meeting that signaled improved relations following a tumultuous period of trade tariffs, human rights issues, and intensifying security concerns.
In this visit, Li Qiang held talks with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. What were the outcomes?
The two sides agreed to improve military communication to avoid incidents. They also discussed thorny issues, including trade barriers, critical minerals, and a recent aerial encounter between the two sides over the LOC.
I thought you would mention the panda.
How could I forget? China will send a new pair of giant pandas to Australia, which reminds me that pandas will be coming back to DC later this year.
Okay, and let's not forget about New Zealand.
Of course, apologies for the digression. Li Qiang was in Wellington before Canberra. He held talks with Prime Minister Luxon. The two countries announced new agreements on issues including trade and the environment.
In recent years, New Zealand has voiced concerns over the Taiwan Strait, Hong Kong, and China's increased security engagements in the Pacific.
Li Qiang's visits also come as both Australia and China seek closer ties with countries in the Pacific, including the Solomon Islands. Both countries sent representatives to meet the newly elected Prime Minister, Jeremiah Manele, to further cooperation.
In the previous episode, we mentioned that Albanese was the first to congratulate Manele. He also sent Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles to the Solomon Islands.
China's envoy to the Pacific Islands, Qian Bo, met with Manele to reaffirm, according to the Solomon Islands, the special relationship between the two countries.
In the long-term competition for political influence in the Pacific Islands, the rivalry between Australia and China is intensifying, slowly but surely.
Tune in to future episodes for more updates. Monica, I think we have new developments on topics we covered last month. Is that right?
Yes, there are updates on unrest in New Caledonia and the landslide in Papua New Guinea.
In New Caledonia, France's President Emmanuel Macron has suspended the planned electoral reform, an amendment that would have extended voting rights to non-Indigenous residents.
The reform unearthed long-held fears from Indigenous residents of other voters diluting their voting power, resulting in protests and violent confrontations between the police and protesters.
President Macron has condemned the violence, imploring residents to dismantle all blockades. Further, police have arrested 11 people, including the leader of New Caledonia's pro-independence party, Christian Taine, for organized crime offenses.
In the most recent update, Taine will be sent to detention in France alongside 3 other activists.
Despite the demonstration's severity, the EU elections, the upcoming French national elections, and the Paris Olympics have quickly overshadowed New Caledonia's civil unrest, with French media turning attention away from coverage of the territory.
It's disheartening news, and I hope some form of resolution emerges.
I hope so too. Lastly, on the landslide in Papua New Guinea, official figures estimate that at least 2,000 people were buried in the landslide, but rescue teams only managed to recover 12 bodies by mid-June. Exact numbers of killed and displaced people remain unknown.
As part of relief measures, local authorities are relocating 4 villages and the high-risk areas within each of those villages that were affected by the landslide.
Thankfully, Australia has pledged $1.3 million in aid on top of an initial $2.5 million to support reconstruction efforts. The funds will be used to restore connectivity, support local healthcare services, and provide learning packs for children.
And that's all we have for today.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Pacific Airwaves. Let us know what you think about our coverage by writing to our email at searadio@csis.org.
If you're not following us already, please subscribe or give us a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite streaming platform.
Our producer is Marla Hiller. Special thanks to our interns Amelie De Leon, Chuanling Neo, Zhang Pham for their assistance with this episode. I'm Andreyka Nasligawa.
And I'm Monica Sato.
And we'll see you next month for another episode of Pacific Airwaves.